today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. This past weekend, Matchroom held a show south of the border in
Hermosillo. I gotta tell you, it was some hell of a show.
The fists were flying as reigning WBA featherweight champion Erica Cruz of Mexico took on Jelena Mrdjenovic, the former champion of Canada, for the second time. And as I predicted, as I expected, the second fight worked out much like the first, where Erica Cruz was just better. Better at every turn, better all around, busier, faster, sharper.
Jelena looked slow and ineffective, just like the last time.
But unlike the last time, this time, she had Sugar Hill Stewart in the corner. Sugar Hill Stewart, who famously trains reigning WBC heavyweight champion Tyson Fury. And I told you in the build-up, I told you, it's not going to make a difference. Sugar Hill can't fight the fight for her, and regardless of what game plan he entrusts Jelena to execute, it's up to Jelena. And Jelena was an aging fighter, an aging former champion that hadn't fought in over a year's time ahead of this fight, ahead of this rematch.
The game plan seems to have been a little different here.
Jelena's game plan in the early goings of this fight in the first round, she seemed to have wanted to back off Erica Cruz, darting out of her corner, getting on that jab. She seems to have wanted to put Erica on her back foot. And if I'm being honest,
that's actually not a bad game plan to use against a come-forward pressure fighter.
It isn't, because characteristically, the pressure fighter is a lot better coming forward than they are moving backwards or laterally. So I understood the strategy, I understood the game plan, but even with that, even having the right game plan,
game plan quickly unraveled because at 40 years old, Jelena just doesn't have the sharpness and physicality it takes to execute it.
Not on those 40-year-old legs and dull reflexes. She lacks the snap on her shots, the snap on her punches to back off somebody like Erica and get some respect.
Erica doesn't necessarily have the fastest feet or the fastest hands, but she's still a lot faster than Jelena Mrdjenovic.
And tack on that she's a southpaw, an aggressive one, an awkward southpaw.
Makes for a long night.
Erica's not a conventional boxer with a textbook style. A lot of her shots are pretty wild.
Wild, wide, sweeping shots and looping shots. She's not a conventional textbook boxer with a textbook style.
Erica Cruz, the reigning WBA featherweight champion who hails from high-altitude Mexico. Fighters that fight out of that region come from there. They often have very good gas tanks. They can keep the punches coming from the opening round to the final round unless you can put a dent in them. And Jelena couldn't. She was always a step behind Erica Cruz,
who landed big right hooks and looping backhands.
Looping left hands out of the southpaw stance. Erica Cruz being a southpaw and Jelena being an orthodox fighter.
I didn't give Jelena a single round in this fight. Not a single round.
I'm not saying that to be hard on her. I'm just giving it to you straight. The only world-class qualities, world-class properties that Jelena Mrdjenovic has retained over time is a world-class chin, as she stood up to some really hard shots. Didn't go down, didn't go out.
It's all she's retained over time. Very good punch resistance and toughness, but as far as ability, she ain't got it.
She couldn't keep up with Erica. In truth, I think Jelena should call it a career, because I don't think there are very many girls out there that she can keep up with. Not unless we're talking about journey women with upside-down records. She can probably still beat those kinds of fighters in those kinds of fights, but that upper echelon, that upper tier,
forget about it.
She really hasn't improved from the last time I saw her. If anything, Erica Cruz seems to have improved a bit. Shots were a little cleaner, movement was a little better.
Characteristically, she's a come-forward, aggressive pressure fighter, but she actually managed the distance well here.
Won every single round on my card. The most that Jelena could do to try and contend with Erica was dive into a clinch and smother her as Erica closed the gap to get off big punches and looping shots. That was it.
Most of the fight, Jelena wasn't landing. Most of the fight.
Most of the time, her reflexes are dull, her timing is off, there's no snap on her shots, and she's standing on 40-year-old legs. I don't say any of this to be hard on her, but that's the reality of what we saw south of the border this past weekend.
That's the truth. I don't think it's safe for Jelena to be in there, not unless she's in there with journey women that have upside-down records.
Those are the only fighters, the only kind of fighters she can fight with and hope to secure the W. Those upper echelon fighters, your Sarah Mahfoud, your Amanda Serrano, you can fucking forget about it.
Those youngsters coming through, the ambitious ones that are sharp and fast and looking to make names for themselves.
They would use Jelena Mrdjenovic as a stepping stone. I firmly believe that she should call it a career here and now. It's not safe to stick around.
Boxing is a dangerous enough sport as it is, but you need to be able to at least keep up, and Jelena can't do that anymore.
That is the reality of things. Congratulations to Erica Cruz for retaining her WBA title in the fashion I predicted the fashion I expected. I figured not much is going to change between fights for Jelena, and not much did.
Erica's just gonna beat her again in the same fashion she did before. That's what happened.
We also saw a really good light flyweight contest, a battle of the unbeatens for the vacant IBF title
Between South Africa's own Sivanani Nonishenga
and Mexico's own Hector Flores. Balls to the wall, battle for it all, a brawl from start to finish.
Those two boys left it all out there south of the border. Those Matchroom Mexico shows us something.
The last one I saw with Hiroto Kayaguchi defending his belt. This one with Nonishenga and Hector Flores. Nonishenga secured the W, did enough to win a points decision and become his division's IBF champion. Up there 2 divisions north at super flyweight, veteran fighter and champion Juan Francisco Gallo Estrada.
He returned to action after over a year of inactivity, having not seen action since the Chocolatito rematch early last year.
This was intended to be a tune-up fight. Let's just call it what it is, but it didn't play out like one. It didn't play out like any tune-up fight I've ever seen.
No, this wasn't a tune-up fight. This was a fight, a real fight against Cortez.
Juan Francisco Estrada's ambitious countryman, a youngster who showed a lot of good qualities, gave us a lot to think about. He might have dropped the decision, but he gave Juan Francisco Estrada one hell of a fight, gave a good account of himself, and in many ways, even though he lost the decision, he won a lot of people over. So let's talk about what we saw. You know, Juan Francisco Estrada, perhaps that's decline that we saw, or ring rust, or a bit of both, but there were moments where he seemed just a step behind Cortez.
And I don't want to be too hard on Gallo, because having been out of action as long as he was out of action, ring rust, it does collect. It is a real thing.
So while I do think Cortez gave a good account of himself, that must have been, at least in some parts, due to ring rust on the part of Gallo Estrada, who landed some really big shots, really big punches, and he took them well.
Landed some of his own.
Some really edge-of-your-seat moments as Cortez landed several big, and I mean big, right hands on Gallo Estrada, the veteran fighter, the champion, who was trying to make it to that Chocolatito trilogy that has since been announced now that he's secured the W, though I have to be honest.
He looked vulnerable in there. He looked really vulnerable.
Chalk it up to one part ring rust and another part an ambitious youngster that was getting a chance to fight on the biggest stage he's ever fought on. An ambitious youngster in Cortez, who I think secured himself some more fights, given the performance that he put on. Lots of action mid-range to inside, lots of action in the pocket. I want to say that Cortez showed great powers of recovery. There was a moment in the fight where Juan Francisco Estrada,
he got off a gut-busting body shot.
I mean, Juan Francisco Estrada still can punch. He still has power. He actually floored Cortez in the early goings of this fight, floored him in the second round. And as the fight progressed, both guys are going at it, trading punches mid-range to inside. Gallo landed a gut-busting body shot that visibly hurt Cortez, and it started to feel like the end was near. He really started laying into Cortez, but survived it. He weathered the storm and showed great powers of recovery, got back in the fight, and kept it competitive, as this fight was competitive throughout.
You can't say that either guy was having it all their way. No. This fight,
these two fighters had to work for everything they got, though ultimately, 12th and final round, when the scorecards were read, Juan Francisco Estrada was awarded the decision. I felt a little bit ambivalent about that. I wasn't sure that he had done enough, though I wasn't scoring it live like I do with most fights, so
I wasn't expecting an actual fight. I was expecting a tune-up.
All hell broke loose after the opening bell, based on what I saw.
Cortez is definitely a good fighter, very good fighter, but he throws all his punches with the same intensity. They're all fastballs.
He's a fastball pitcher. Throws those shots with bad intentions. Every single punch, every single shot. It's not nuanced like a Chocolatito, to where his punches are not only short, effective, but also defensible. Cortez, he swings a bit wider, a lot wider actually, than Chocolatito does, so it was easier for Juan Francisco Estrada to get under and around a lot of those shots, catch him
on the arms and gloves.
The Gallo Estrada I saw last night, had he gone straight into a Chocolatito trilogy instead of a fight with Cortez, he likely would have lost that fight with Chocolatito, lost it wide, though if I'm being honest,
I feel like I already saw Gallo lose to Chocolatito early last year. I didn't score that fight for Gallo, I scored that fight for Choco, and I think Choco got robbed.
If yesterday's Juan Francisco Estrada would have gone straight into a trilogy fight with Chocolatito, I think he would have lost by an even wider margin. I don't know if last night's fight,
I don't know, was that a blessing in disguise? A wake-up call that he'll have even more to deal with an even more experienced fighter, a more decorated one in Chocolatito?
was last night's fight the kick in the ass that Juan Francisco Estrada needed to focus up because there's bigger fish to fry later on this year in December? Is that what that was?
Post-fight, immediately after the fight, this image was posted to Matchroom and DAZN's social media.
December 3rd, by way of Matchroom and DAZN, we are in fact going to get the third fight. And I was worried throughout the course of the Cortez fight that Juan Francisco Estrada might be going through a bit too much to go straight into a trilogy fight with Chocolatito, because Juan was getting hit a lot. He ate a lot of hard shots.
That's not the idea behind a tune-up fight. You know, you have a tune-up fight to tune up. You don't want to get into a full-on brawl.
But that's what the Cortez fight was. That wasn't some shaking off the cobwebs, shaking off the ring rust fight. That was a full-on fight, full-on brawl.
Gallo, I gotta tell you, he might have had just enough to eke out a decision over this Cortez kid, but I'm not convinced he actually earned the decision in the last Chocolatito fight. So ahead of this one,
ahead of a trilogy? Based on how Gallo looked last night and how Choco looked the last time I saw him.
Do you remember the Martinez fight? That hard-punching kid from flyweight, Martinez, who moved up in weight for that Choco fight?
WBC flyweight champion Julio Cesar Martinez, who was thoroughly outclassed, taken to school by the veteran former champion, Chocolatito. You know what they say, you're only as good as your last fight. Well, you saw Choco's last fight, and last night, you saw Gallo's last fight.
And you're only as good as your last fight, right?
Right. It's what they say.
I favor Choco to win the rematch. The trilogy, I should say.
But I felt he won the last fight. So how do I know that he's not going to get jobbed on the cards the same way he got jobbed the last time? How do I know he's not going to get robbed?
Might have to make it even more decisive in the third fight.
Finally, in men's heavyweight news, per tweet from Michael Benson, Tyson Fury has declared that he will announce his next fight next week. Usyk has stated that he doesn't want to fight anymore. He wants to fight next year, not this year. So I'm not going to wait around for anybody. I'm going to be announcing a fight next week.
He says this after his own promoter clearly stated the fight's not happening this year, that they're targeting the fight for February of next year.
He said that early last week, way before Tyson Fury made these comments, and we've talked about that. The childish games that Tyson Fury is attempting to play, it's almost like he's trying to hoodwink the fans.
Pit them against Usyk, trying to make Usyk come off as some kind of a diva when he's anything but.
Tyson Fury quite predictably declared that the Anthony Joshua fight can still happen in the future. He said, I still think people would like to see that fight, so if Usyk doesn't want the fight for whatever reason, then we'll go offer AJ to fight.
To which Usyk's handler, responded,
after Usyk will win against Tyson Fury, yes, I believe it will be a good fight of two losers to find out who is better.
Not a guy you see mincing words with anyone very often.
He's not given to the back and forth banter we see from Eddie Hearn, from Frank Warren. He's just not that kind of guy. He's a no-nonsense kind of customer.
Like Usyk.
But you know, Tyson Fury can't keep his trap shut. He responded to Aegis Climax saying, I will destroy Usyk, hashtag bum city, small man syndrome. This man, Climax Boxing, is a tit. If he can beat me, let's go December, you pack of bum dossers.
Oh, dosser this, bum that.
Wait a minute, are you saying that Usyk's got small man complex? Aren't you the same guy who keeps calling him a middleweight?
According to you, he is a small man, so how could he have a complex?
You know, like a Napoleon complex, to where the little guy's always talking big talk to compensate for the size he ain't got. Near as I can tell, between you and Usyk, you're the talker. You might be the one with small man syndrome, even though you're the naturally bigger guy.
He's always talking about other men's penises.
Anthony Joshua's, Francis Ngannou's. I mean, really, what's he shooting for when he does that?
I don't know, but he's now revealed that the reason he vacated his Ring Magazine belt is so he can become a 3-time ring heavyweight champion.
By beating Usyk, he would then share that record with Muhammad Ali, who is the only other man to do it.
That's just a revisionist version of history.
It is.
That's not the story the people at Ring Magazine told.
The skinny on why Tyson Fury vacated the Ring Magazine title, according to the people at Ring Magazine, is they called him up and asked if he was serious about his retirement, and he said that he is, and he subsequently relinquished the Ring Magazine belt.
We talked about that here on the channel. If Tyson Fury chooses to revise the story,
try to rewrite history, that will not change what is already documented, what quotes are already out there, and what has already been said.
This cult of mentally diseased and out-of-shape, fat and flabby fanboys have been in rare form lately.
Popping up all over the place, trying to start arguments with anybody who points out all the inconsistencies in Tyson Fury's career, the inconsistencies in his story.
Yeah, these guys like to act like we're lying about Tyson Fury, like we're saying something about him that isn't true, when we're just quoting what the man said and highlighting how different it is day to day.
Highlighting how much what he says changes day by day.
He waits good up until Bob Arum lets it be known that that fight ain't happening this year. In all likelihood, they're looking to do it in February of next year.
And he waits good up until Usyk says that he's taking the rest of the year off, that he spent enough time in preparation preparing for the Joshua rematch, and now he wants to rest and recuperate, and they can do the fight next year. He waits good up until everybody says this so that he can start demanding that they do the fight in December, demanding that they do the fight this year.
And his fanboys get mad when people don't go for it. When people call a spade and call him out for what he's doing. You waited good up until you knew the fight wasn't going to happen this year
to start asking for the fight to happen this year, because you know it's not going to happen this year.
That's why you're demanding it. That's why you're asking for it. You're trying to change people's perceptions of Alexander Usyk.
Trying to make him seem difficult when he's not difficult. Trying to make him seem like a diva when he's not a diva. You're a diva. You're the one who's asking for $500 million to come out of retirement and do the fight with this guy. All the diva antics are coming from you, not him. This is not a hard guy to negotiate with by any stretch of the imagination. Tyson Fury prides himself on being a road warrior, having won every alphabet title he's ever won on the road. Well, Usyk's done that more times than you, at more weights, against more champions.
Without any intermittent stints of activity or impromptu retirements.
Outlandish demands, ultimatums, or requests.
Anybody that knows this guy knows this guy's no diva. If any one of you two boys is a diva, it's you.
Not him. You're the chatty patty after all. You're the one that can't shut the fuck up!
So all these head games really aren't gonna work.